Hey guys, Kai here, and welcome to another build guide. This time, we're transformed into Saitama himself with this One Punch Man build that's great for clear, decent for bossing, and generally an all-round fun build. Using the combination of Doryani's Fist Gauntlets that grants Doryani's Touch skill, in combination with Doryani's Prototype that gives nearby enemies the same lightning resistance as us, we lower our own lightning resistance to absurd levels, stack flat lightning, and run around punching things into oblivion. This build itself is nothing new, but I feel that Ultimatum League could be perfect for it, due to its potential for screen-wide clear, decent survivability, and, most of all, how budget-friendly this is. At most, this build costs around 10 EX, even on consoles, since it uses almost entirely uniques and does not even require a 6-link. It works by lowering resistances with 5 Thread of Hope jewels and Maligaro's Lens Shield, and then stacking flat lightning through Abyss jewels, Wrath Aura, and of course Doryani's Fist Gauntlets. The gameplay is very simple. Cast Seismic Cry now and then to keep up our endurance charges, through Chieftain's Valaco Storm's Embrace Ascendancy node, cast Stormbrand now and then to proc Elemental Overload, and run around punching enemies with Doryani's Touch. We also convert our endurance charges to brutal charges with Iron's Anguish Cloth Belt for a potential 21% chance to do triple damage with 7 charges up. The main challenge of the build is bringing back up our fire and cold resistances, but this is done relatively easily using Tassalia's Cleansing Water Ascendancy node for 100 fire resistance, and using 2 Sapphire rings that both have cold and fire resistance rolls. This is very important. Our chest piece handles lightning damage from hits through armor, so we use Determination, and we also convert 50% of lightning damage from hits as either cold or fire by using an Avian Twins Talisman. Lightning damage over time can be painful, so be mindful of that. This also means that all the gear shown here is pretty much mandatory, and if you're lacking any specific stats, get them on your rings or talisman. Now, let's go through the gear and gems. Now, beginning with the helmet, we have the Brian Crown Prophet Crown, and this is where we'd slot our auras linked to a level 4 or a level 3 Enlighten, so that's Blood and Sand, Wrath, and Determination. Next up, we have Doryani's Prototype, and this is where we basically put our cast when damage setup, so that's Summon Flame Golem, cast when damage taken, linked to Molten Shell, and also Enfeeble. This is purely just for defenses. Now moving on to the shield, we use Maligaro's Lens Compound Shield, and this is where we'd put our Ancestral War Chief with Stormbrand. If we have a 6-link, Flame Dash goes in the body armor and Stormbrand is linked to increased critical strike. If not, put your Flame Dash right here as well. For our boots, we use Bubonic Trail Murder Boots, and this is where we put the Seismic Cry and Berserk. We use these boots because it gives us these 2 Abyss Jewel slots, which we use to put our flat lightning jewels. So you want jewels with adds flat lightning to attacks, and also try and get life on these jewels as well. Next up, in the gloves, this is where we'll slot Pulverize into Fortify, Fog of War support, and also elemental damage with attacks. In my case, I use Awakened elemental damage with attacks. For the belt, we use Iron's Anguish. This converts our endurance charges to brutal charges and also gives us some much needed fire resistance. Now onto the rings and amulet. We basically need 2 sapphire rings, and we take this as an opportunity to get any additional stats we want, like dexterity or intelligence, but the main focus on both of these rings is getting rings that have cold resistance rolls and fire resistance rolls. If it is at any point that you do not have both rolls on the ring, you can always benchcraft them, and failing that, you can still try to get any additional resistances. Well, you need it also on the talisman. Again, we use the talisman to convert 50% of lightning damage from hits as either cold or fire resistance. And for flask, you need a life flask, and then you can literally just use whatever it is you want. Now let's get into the skill tree and ascendancy choices. So this is my skill tree. All these circles that you are seeing are from the Thread of Hope jewels. Now the Thread of Hope jewels come in different sizes. You can always divine them to increase the size or decrease the size. And those sizes are important because it makes you able to allocate things within those small outer rings. Again, we use Thread of Hope because it lowers our resistances by up to about 20%. And you can see here in this case I've allocated bravery and a bunch of other stats. Basically you need call to arms, so get your Thread of Hope in that position to, I think it's like large or medium for it to fit right there. We also use the Lethal Pride that grants us rage generation, and that Lethal Pride also grants us 20% fire resistance whenever we take the specific node that's called Gladiator's Perseverance. Usually this does not give us this at all, but because of the Lethal Pride, it transforms this and gives us the additional 20% fire resistance. And you can always like allocate that on your amulet, because now you can reroll basically the anointments on corrupted amulets. So we basically want also some cluster jewels. I have this cluster jewel with Drive the Destruction and Martial Prowess, which isn't really necessary, but Fuel the Fight is a bit necessary. You basically need this to leech life and mana whenever you're attacking through Drive the Destruction and also Fuel the Fight. And the sockets, we use these to equip jewels like Crimson Jewels that gives us additional percentage maximum life, and also fire and cold resistance. So if you're lacking any resistances, use these jewel sockets that you get from your cluster jewels to boost those. We get additional jewel sockets here from this large cluster jewel, and this gives us Prismatic Heart, which grants us +10 to all elemental resistances and also gives us increased elemental damage, and gives us Vengeful Commander, which increases our aura effect. In addition to that, we have Disorienting Display, which gives us 25% increased elemental damage. And as said before, we use these jewel sockets to either put in Abyss Jewels or regular jewels that give us life and or elemental resistances. None of these cluster jewels are mandatory, but these choices are actually good to squeeze out a bit more damage. So it's up to you. If you can find cluster jewels that are actually better than these, then go right ahead. The main purpose is that we need them to expand our jewel sockets so that we can slot in some more resistance jewels and flatlining abyss jewels. And again, here's the rest of the tree. You can just pause the video at any point in time to see exactly which particular nodes I've taken through the use of the Thread of Hope jewels. Now moving on to Ascendancy choices, we take Tahoa's Forest Strength. We also take Tassalia's Cleansing Water, we definitely need that. We take Tukohamo's War Herald, and finally Falako's Storm Embrace. There's no other choices basically because everything else leads to like fire damage or some other rubbish. This is pretty much the only Ascendancy choices you can take for this build. And that's pretty much it for the build. I've gone over everything that's mandatory. Again, if you've liked the display that was shown in the intro and stuff like that, and you have any experience with Path of Exile, you probably don't need all this explanation. You probably just need the path of building, which is linked down below. But in summarizing, it's a very fun build. It's something entirely different. You just run around one-shotting all mobs. It's great for clearing like all level content straight up to T16s just fine. For bossing, it's not the greatest, but it is relatively decent. And if you get like a triple damage shot, you can one-shot a lot of bosses or one-shot the phases for each bosses. So that has been it for this build guide. Check out the path of building, like and subscribe if you like the content, and enjoy playing Path of Exile Ultimate. Cheers.